the example of this would be in May of 1985, when Congress, the Panchayat system, right, the sort of supposedly partyless system, launches a civil disobedience campaign, and bombs start going off in Kathmandu in June 1985. And then here's the last part, Jana Andolan, which of course I said before stands for People's Movement. It started in 1990, and this would have to be the breaking point theoretically when revolution would have set to started. It is at the time that 7 major communist parties formed the United Left Front and formed an alliance with Nepali Congress, because that was just what everybody did. The People's Movement created the Constitution that the movement declared to be in effect in 1990 of November of 1990. The important thing about this is it in effect identifies the people as the source of political legitimacy. So they have a sort of constitutional assembly, the king's not involved, and they're like, this new constitution's in effect because the people are the sole source of legitimacy. And they pressured the crown to accept it in 91, and they have their first election on May, which is the first election they have in over 4 years. I'm doing a bad job with here with the slides. All right. Nepali Congress wins the elections, who were the Crown's choice for parliamentary leadership. The local people dispute the results, and combined with the fact of the National Communist Party People's Front winning 9 of the sort of like, I think it was almost 200 seats, the Nepali Congress gets really jealous and sends out the military and police to punish the people supporting the communist groups. Any more here. Feeling like Jana Andolan wasn't revolutionary enough, 4 of the communist parties formed the CPN Unity Group, Unity Center. A history of revisionism and compromises had finally set in. In this first convention, the group leader would be elected was Dr. Abhiram Bhattarai, who is currently an active politician. He's number 2 in the Maoist group now. And their line was, quote, protracted armed struggle on the route to a new democratic solution, unquote. And that declaration put them an enemy with the government, and so they have to go underground. In 1992, more of the same strategy of the Nepali Congress has found the Nepali people in the grip of a crippling economic crisis as a result of the changes that the government implemented. The CPN Unity ganged up with other less violent or revisionist groups to form the Joint People's Agitation Committee to effect a general strike on April 6th. The other as well as other agitation programs. On April 5th, April 5th, the day before the general strike, the committee called for 30 minutes of lights out before Kathmandu. Violence breaks out in front of the hospital when activists try to enforce the lights out on the hospital. On the morning of the 6th, strikers and police engage in armed conflict, which breaks out in front of a police station, leaving 2 strikers dead. Mass rallies that are scheduled for that day in Kathmandu were waylaid by police forces, and as a result, a riot broke out. Nepal Communications building was set on fire. Nepal Telecommunications was under King Mahendra, the only phone company, which you see a lot of, especially with the news and, where am I going to get my telephone lines? It was all there. The police opened fire to massacre 14 people, including innocents. The magnitude of the event is held in regards in a lot of the ways that Kent State Massacre has occurred here, and I can personally attest to the man guards surrounding the building even to this day, including the charring on the side of the building, which I think people leave there nostalgically. So, with all these sort of changes happening, people are trying to, I guess, identify with the Maoists and the communists that are happening, that are affecting this sort of area. But there's a more visible face of the Communist Party, one that didn't go underground as a result of the sort of Jana Andolan movement in 1990. The more visible face of communism in Nepal is the CPN, Unified Marxist-Leninists, or UML. And they ride on the communist fervor, and it curries more favor with the more affluent city-goers and wins the election and as the largest party and forms government. The UML promises reforms and distances themselves from the CPN United Center as unnecessary and excessive. Even though they didn't have the largest amount of seats in parliament, they still had a minority, the largest minority of seats, but they still didn't have what they needed to push out the reforms that they had. Combined with the threat of communist revolution, the supposed Communist Party joined forces with the Nepali Congress to fight against the rising Unity Center group. In 1994, Bhattarai and Pushpal Kamal Dahal, also known as Prachanda, and I'll call him Prachanda throughout the rest of the presentation, which translates into fierce, started a split in the group ideologically and in theory and in practice, and became so divided in 1996 they simply renamed themselves to CPN Maoist. There was kind of a conflict over the name, and they just went with Maoist. In 1994, various factions of the Nepali Congress, Nepali Communist Party merged with the Communist Party of Nepal Maoists, whose chairman is now Prachanda. The people of Nepal who suffer from the status quo under Nepal's Congress government are now mostly demystified under the sort of promises of change, democracy, but also the media hasn't saturated their ideologies so much as to blind them from the real political and economic reforms that the Maoists were bringing to them. The Maoists, obviously being underground, were doing a lot of operations and building, basically nation building, outside in the countryside of Nepal. Even though Nepal is the size of Iowa, you basically have 3 cities where, they're very affluent. But, I mean, if you take the country as a whole, it's literally the poorest, or one of the 5 poorest countries in the world. So they started building hospitals and schools and whatnot, and basically the Nepali Congress propaganda couldn't get to them about the Maoists, and so they started gaining popularity there. So that starts basically the People's War. Initially, the People's Liberation Army materialized on the countryside from that population. These initial actions were to liberate and radicalize Royalist police headquarters and district headquarters. Until the constitutional mandate, under constitutional mandate, the People's Liberation Army could only be resisted by the Nepali police because the PLA was considered an insurgent group. Officially, it wasn't until the police resistance occurred and officially it was only the police that resisted until the People's Liberation attacked an army's barracks in 2002. And after a failed round of peace talks with the Maoists, the military was employed. So the official date is on February 13, 1996. The Maoists start the Nepalese War with the following 2 goals: overthrow the king, and to establish a People's Republic of Nepal under genuine socialist rule. Why it's considered the first day is because they had a sort of joint coordinated strike, which includes the attacking and the razing of a Coca-Cola factory just outside the outskirts of Kathmandu. The town that resides in is called Coca-Cola, even though it has a formal name. The razing of a foreign-owned liquor factory. The government-controlled agricultural development bank in Shingali was ransacked and razed. An investment capitalist fund was raided with a reported 1.3 million rupees in properties, and species were seized, and loan documents and liens were resolved, which is code language for burnt and no longer valid. 7 people are shot to death in that. And in addition to that, you have 4 regions on which police outposts and explosives were requisitioned. Looks like districts and police outposts and things like this. So little Capitol buildings and things like this.